everyone. We're nearly there. We're Friday afternoon and nearly at afternoon tea, so we can have another coffee and charge up and keep going. Really loved those last couple of sessions, super informative. Great work. I also just want to say a quick thank you to UXNZ for bringing the local and international community together. It's always fabulous to come and, meet everybody again and meet new people as well, make new connections. So I'm going to talk about this attack of the 10-foot customer journey map. So I'm going to assume that you all know what a customer journey map is and why they are valuable. I'm not here to convince you to do one. I am here to just talk you through a case study project where basically my journey map was getting larger and larger and more complex as the project went on. And what we did to wrestle it under control and ensure that it was an artifact that people could engage with at the end of the day. So I'm based in Auckland at Digital Arts Network, which is part of a global network of advertising agencies called TBWA. And there are a number of different specialties that each advertising agency has, and Auckland is the centre for UX. So that matters because basically the network reaches out to us in Auckland when they're doing a user experience or customer experience project for support and help. So at the end of last year, we got a call from TBWA in Melbourne to get some help on a customer experience project to create a journey map. Here's Billy and I. So Billy was the new customer experience lead in Melbourne, and we'd been asked to produce a journey map that was current state only and from existing data. So to look at all the existing research and summarize that in a customer journey map. We're looking fairly chuffed here as we'd just done some interviews which helped shine the light on the data that we had been looking at. So I was flown over there, arrived at this funky, modern, clean office space in Melbourne, and to a huge stack of 45 research reports and a massive ring binder of all customer marketing comms over the last few years. So this was challenge number one, or really the challenge of the whole project as well. How were we going to piece together all these disparate data sets, some of them a little bit inconsistent, some 5 years old, and some with some dubious kind of qual that was, small numbers, focus groups, into a coherent customer story that people could understand. So where did we begin? So fortunately, we convinced our stakeholders to focus on one audience only and one particular part of the journey. So that helped to control the monster from the beginning. Because it's really, really important not to be overly ambitious and try and include more than one customer in your journey map, or even more than one journey, and that can happen. So start simple. Gathering your data. So because it was based on existing data, we had to read and extract pieces of information from all these 45 research documents into a giant spreadsheet. It looked like this. Whoops. Yeah, it was pretty boring looking. That's our beautiful artifact. Not very engaging. But yeah, so then we started extracting it into this Excel spreadsheet that was formulated like a journey map. Luckily for me, Billy had done largely a lot of the legwork before I'd arrived and inputted a lot of the data there. So challenge number two, though, was that, as you can see, there are many columns on this. There were 18 stages in this customer journey because it was an end-to-end customer life cycle. So what did we do? Well, we looked at how could we consolidate these different stages into higher level phases. So we consolidated them into 6 high-level phases with other typical customer ones of awareness, research, purchasing, use, etc. Great. So having those in those bigger chunks obviously helped people access the map a little bit easier. So there were 6 access points rather than 18. So challenge number 3, though, was how were we going to find a really engaging narrative amongst all that data? There was no customer voice. It was all just existing research. So, basically I managed to persuade Billy and the stakeholders that we need to go out and talk to people. And so what we did, instead of talking to customers, because it wasn't that phase of the project, we were in a diagnosis phase, just looking at what was the existing knowledge. We need to go out and talk to customer-facing staff. And quickly, we only had 1.5 weeks to do this, to produce the map, as well as interview and gather that fresh data. But luckily we did, because it got us closer to the customer, and having those frontline conversations with the people that know the product really well and also know the customer needs fairly well. This proved invaluable in providing that clear voice that we needed in the map and being able to find a narrative thread through all of that dense data. And it brought the data alive. To speak to real people really, really helped. So the next step was deciding on the building blocks. So you can see there that we color-coded the rows. So the rows are the swim lanes. And there's, the stages, the sub-stages, and the usual think, feel, and do, which is super important for the customer. And then underneath that, we also looked a little bit, it was almost like a blueprint, because we were looking a bit about the back-end marketing comms that were going on. And we also were looking at any insights or recommendations that had come out of the reports and inputting that as well. But most importantly were the quotes and the pain points, right? Because those are the bits that people really engage with. So the next challenge was we'd got them all categorized into those little blocks in the spreadsheet, but how, again, were we going to tie it together into this narrative? So basically, I got out my Post-it note block and started going through. So this is a bit blurry because this is confidential Post-it noting, but it gives you an idea. And that's when the giant spreadsheet started turning into this 10-foot Post-it note creature on the wall of our little project room. So basically what I did is I went through the data and I looked for those moments of truth and started Post-it noting those, and then looking at the supporting data points that we had and started putting those up on the wall as well. And as we read through the moments of truth, like, it's great to stand back and just read through and just see how the narrative kind of seams together. You could see the emotional journey that the customer had been on and some of the hoops that they'd tried to jump through, and their expectations and the reality at the other end. Our next challenge was engaging the stakeholders close to the project. So obviously we had been in this little room, immersed in these documents, and we had 1 million Post-it notes on the wall. How are we going to play this back to our stakeholders in a way that they could engage with it and understand? So what we did was we wrote a little story, a little draft narrative to test it out. And we took them through that and encompassed all those pain points and the journey of how the customer got from A to B. So the client understood what was going on with the data without having to read the spreadsheet, which they weren't going to do, or even go through all those Post-it notes. It also helped them guide us directionally on whether we were heading in the right direction with the project. Was it kind of aligned with the original business objectives of what they wanted to investigate? And so it's super important to obviously take your stakeholders on that journey with you. And ideally, if you are going to go out and do interviews and it's well planned, take them with you. Get them to hear that feedback directly. And finally, the biggest challenge of all, finding and visualizing that story. So how did we go from this Post-it note creature from the dark cave room to a beautifully designed artifact that people could look at a glance and understand what was going on? It was time to call in the designer to wrestle this beast to the ground once and for all. The designer was accustomed, though, to working on brand and print campaigns. Basically, he would never have seen so many Post-it notes in his life before, or a customer journey map. Would his weapons of mass design production meet this challenge? It wasn't the easiest task for him to get his head around. Had we brought him in earlier on in the project, he would have been on the same stage of understanding that we were. So we had to sort of backfill the whole story and walk through it and go through a few iterations of visualizing it. This is where we got to. Again, it's sort of a bit blurry, but it gives you the idea. This is a sketch map, purposely, low fidelity at this stage. So luckily the map, a customer journey map, follows the convention of a chart or a diagram, and that gave the designer a way of understanding and engaging with what needed to be displayed and how. The weapons were adapted, and this was the result. And we decided to keep it looking draft like this, so the stakeholders would feel that it's not final. It was definitely a work in progress. So the beast had morphed. It had gone from being this giant spreadsheet of 1 million data points to the sprawling post-it note creature into the sketch, which still had to be plan printed across about 4 AO-sized posters. Each time we needed a draft, it took about 2 to 3 hours to emerge. So it would come out on the big plan printer at the agency, line by line, which wasn't really efficient in terms of being able to work with it. So what we did, we stripped out some of the data and we made a smaller version that were more like worksheet versions. And that was easier to work with. We chose to use more iconography to communicate interactions between channels, and color coding to kind of indicate level of touch between those things. And then we designed a workshop for the stakeholders to engage with the artifact. And this is super important. So you can create a beautiful artifact, but it's only as good as people's ability to work with it and use it in practice. So that it would be received as a living, breathing thing that would stay alive within the organization, we created a lot of activities for the stakeholders to work with it and engage with it. And that way they could connect with the content of the map in digestible chunks. We had them focus on different phases or different channels, so they didn't have to take it all in one go. But before we got them to do the activities, we told them a story. So remember how we wrote the little draft narrative? Well, we fleshed that out some more. And basically, we stood up in front of the workshop and read through it, end to end, all the different pain points, but in a story thread. And this helped the stakeholders imagine what the experience was like from the customer, which is the whole point of the customer journey map. So that really made them feel the pain, though. So as soon as you make them feel the pain of the customer, they want to leap into solution mode, which is good. So what we did then was we did activities, which this photo shows, where we got them to post-it note some ideas and opportunities that they could see to fix the problem. And that's when everyone gets really activated. It's really great for alignment. So everyone had the same, literally they're on the same page. They're on the same giant plan artifact. And they can see that it's backed by robust data and research, and they're free to move forward into solution mode. And it's not, someone's opinion against someone else's opinion. They're all aligned with the same information. So we started with the monster spreadsheet, which morphed into the sprawling post-it note creature, and then we wrestled it into this 10-foot journey map. At the end of the project, we had demonstrated in a workshop how to use the artifact to create alignment around the customer experience and the key pain points, generate ideas and possible opportunities. Even though it took a long time to print, the sheer size of the artifact actually worked in our favor, as big is sometimes good. And it's good to have a big visual impact. It gets people's attention. Going large was also a solution for all the data that it needed to contain. So with a customer journey map, you can take a high-level view and have less data, or you can really take a low-level view and have more detail. And this definitely was the low-level view. We carefully managed the data, though, using visualization to show the emotional journey and color gradients and etc. The wall chart needed to go onto a wall space in the business so that people can walk past it and digest it. So similar to what Crispin was saying when she was working out in the open, using it as this massive artifact gets a lot of attention from the business. And it generates conversations, and they're productive conversations. In the end, they loved the detail so much, they wanted us to include even more. So that each customer touch point was backed by the data from the research, all the references were in there, So the monster we tamed a little bit grew again. However, a customer journey map is a living document, and an organization has been in the process of gathering more data directly from customers now, so no doubt it has morphed again. So I'm just going to quickly summarize now with a few tips. So 5 tips for impactful journey maps. Effective visual communication is paramount. Using the color coding, the icons, all of that good stuff. It's a powerful way to capture all the highs and lows of a customer experience, often on one giant page, and play it back at a glance. But you need to simplify the complexity. Focus on the story you want to tell. So they shouldn't be like a version of a report on a map. You don't have to include all the data, all the insights, all the quotes. Carve out the story you want to tell. What's the purpose of the story? What's the impact you want to have on the business at the end of the day? Keep it simple and be really harsh in deciding what's in and what's out. Designers need to understand the data, and that means they need to be on the journey from day one. So include them in all your interviews and your research and your synthesis so they can easily come up with solutions of how to cleverly display this kind of complex information. This is not your usual copy and paste content into a template. Like if I'd given them that spreadsheet and go away, make that look pretty, that would not have been great. Gather the right data. So we did interviews with customer-facing staff as a proxy to customers. This was integral to providing a clear voice to the map, convincing quotes where before we only had numbers, and ensuring it's kept alive. Having map champions inside the organization that you're working with, bringing them on the journey, is really essential for it to have longevity after you've finished a project. Ideally, have them involved in the data gathering as well. And workshop it. Turn the pain into gain. Help them ideate, create solutions around the map, and show them and demonstrate how to keep using it. And we're a little bit over time, so thanks, guys.